Welcome. It's so great to see so many of you here, and it's so great to see so many familiar faces with kids launched into college and back again for more. So thanks for all of you for being here. I'm Lauren Lieberman. I'm the Director of College Counseling here at Shady Side, and I'm joined this evening by the rest of my esteemed team, Julie Hertz, Lucas Frankel, Kelsey Williams. If you don't know this team, you will get to know them over your time here. They're amazing and wonderful and fabulous, and we have a ton of fun in the college office. We are also joined by some of our admissions colleagues here. This is the winter program of Coffee and Conversation, a series of conversations created to bring knowledge and information to the parents, primarily of 9th and 10th grade students related to the college process. We had 2 programs this fall. We'll have another 2 programs this spring. Thank you to those of you who wrote in questions beforehand. Because the time is short tonight, I'm going to moderate the panel using primarily the questions that were written in beforehand. If there's time, we'll be able to take 1 or 2 questions from the audience. Many of the questions that were written in are on some of the basics of the college process and how that works at Shady Side. And for those questions, I'm going to point you to some other resources. Tonight will be more focused towards our admissions colleagues who are here. So if all of you have a college counseling for 9th grade, college counseling for 10th grade, you can see that on your portal, and there are folders in there organized on some of those questions. So also you can always reach out with some of those questions. We also cover some of those questions at every Coffee and Conversation. We post those videos. And we're working on a video series that will be coming out later this year of 1-minute short videos that answer your most frequently asked questions. And those are the questions that most people wrote in, like, when does my child take an SAT? Or when does my kid get a college counselor? Or some of the questions that we get a lot will be addressed in those videos and online. So for tonight, we're gonna focus on the ones that really are geared towards our admissions colleagues and friends. So without further ado, I'm going to introduce this evening's panelists. Of course, on my page, they're not exactly in the order they're sitting, but it's good. These are good friends of ours. We have Greg Edelman, who's the Director of Admission from Carnegie Mellon University. Greg is the Director of Admissions. He is a 2001 graduate of St. Vincent College, joined the admissions team in 2002 and never looked back. He earned his master's degree in public management from the Hines College at CMU. Over the years, Greg has also coached lacrosse in both public schools and independent schools. He was a college athlete himself, and I just learned his newest role is as a kindergarten lacrosse coach. So Greg is also the proud parent of a kindergartner and a little girl who's a little bit younger than that, not yet in kindergarten. And then we have Susan Garrity Artizzoni. She is the Director of Undergraduate Admissions at Tufts University. Susan is a graduate of Allegheny College, where she worked in her first admissions job after graduating with a bachelor's degree in history. She's been at Tufts for almost 30 years, holding different roles in the admissions office. Yes, she started when she was 12. That's how all those numbers add up. Her hometown is Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. She's from the South Hills in Bethel Park. And in case you're wondering, she has remained loyal to being a Steelers fan.
Even though I'm married to a Pats fan, and they are insufferable, especially this weekend.
Next in line, we have Cornell Lassane, who is the Vice President for Enrollment and Dean of Admissions at Allegheny College. Cornell was appointed Dean of Admissions in 2014 at Allegheny. He has nearly 2 decades of experience working in higher ed. Before going to Allegheny, he also worked at Carnegie Mellon University with Greg and our own Miss Julie Hertz. So they have known each other for a long time. And last but not least is Amanda Blanchette. She is the Senior Recruitment Coordinator at the University of Michigan. Amanda graduated from Grand Valley State University with a bachelor's in public and nonprofit administration. Her first job in admissions was at Cincinnati Christian University. She's been with the University of Michigan for 5 years. She's been our admissions rep for 5 years, I'm pretty sure. And she is also the Professional Development Chair for the Michigan Association for College Admissions Counseling. So we are so thrilled to have these friends and colleagues here tonight, they have busy lives. They have to read a lot of applications, and we're really lucky to have them here to kind of talk about some of the differences in their schools and how the admissions process works a little bit. So I'm going to just start with an opening question, which is probably the theme that came up the most often in the questions written in. So basically, can you talk a little bit about your admissions review process? How do you make decisions? What does holistic mean in your admissions office? How does your school value qualities such as kindness, honesty, integrity, hard work as a balance against things like GPA test scores? How do extracurriculars figure in? So it's a big one. How do you recognize different qualities, but kind of how does it come together? Talk a little bit about the review process for your applicant pool at your school. Greg, why don't you start us off? And this one we will go down the line for.
Okay. Yeah, so where to begin? That was a loaded question. One question with 13
It's not loaded, it's just long.
One question with 13 parts. So I think what's interesting about schools like Carnegie Mellon is nobody gets admitted based on academics. So the entire applicant pool has strong academics. You know, when you're looking at a test like the SATs, it's capped. There's a ceiling, right? You can't get a score higher than 1,600. When you're looking at GPAs, you can't get a GPA higher than an unweighted 4.0 GPA. You know, to be honest with you, this year our applicant pool, the average SAT is 1510. So and that's counting our humanities college, our school of computer science, is the whole litany of programs at Carnegie Mellon, kind of from soup to nuts. So strong academics bring you to the table for discussion. And you know, I think it's important to remember too, the SATs are not used, there's no predictive value for the SAT. So if you get a 700 on the math, that doesn't mean you're gonna do better in college calculus than a student that got a 670. There's no predictive value. So the SATs, what they help us do is they help us select, they don't help us predict. And that kind of leads into one of the things that we really care about in the admission process, and that's context. So we wanna understand each student's story. You know, so if our average on the SATs is a 1510, we're going to admit students with a 1410. So their SATs are going to be lower than everybody else, but there's a story. So what makes them interesting? What makes them somebody that we should pass over all these other 1510s to go down to the 1410 to take that student? Why? What's the story? What's their context? I mean, what makes them tick? So we spend a lot of time not necessarily poring over transcripts and SATs. We use those things to kind of see where a student falls in line with everyone else, how they compare to everyone else. But what we've really started to focus our time on in recent years, it's collaboration, it's community engagement. So I mean, we even got rid of all optional opportunities in the admission process. So we realized that when you allow students to submit things like resumes or maker portfolios or research abstracts, the students that submit those things is not reflective of the pool as a whole. So a student that submits a research abstract is probably a fairly affluent student from a privileged background. And when you realize that things like SATs, the only thing the SAT universally predicts is affluence. So if you take into account that an affluent student submitting a research abstract is probably already inherently advantaged in the process with higher average SATs, you know, you start to realize kind of the inequities in the process. So we're really kind of focused on now, we ask the same student, regardless of what school they went to or where they're from, every student applying to Carnegie Mellon is asked the same questions. And if we don't ask it, we don't want it. So we want to make sure that all students are kind of entering the process from a level playing field. Again, we really want to understand what makes them tick, you know, help them understand if they did get a B in Calc, why? I mean, what's if the entire pool has an A and you have a B, I mean, what's the story there? You know, so we focus a lot on that. You know, and lastly, I think with the collaboration and the community engagement, you know, there's a lot of data that shows diverse communities learn better than a homogeneous community. So we really want to make sure that our pool, it's as diverse as it possibly can be by all definitions of the word, because everybody benefits from that. So, you know, with highly selective college admission, 80% of the pool is admissible. This year we're going to admit 14%. To be honest, if we read the same pool of applications twice, we'd probably have 2 completely different classes. So there's a little bit of smart that goes into this and a little bit of luck that goes into this as well. But I can tell you our process, it's thorough, and we do make sure that we evaluate all students' applications, not just based on SATs and GPA, but really to understand the context behind the application.
So I'm going to talk just a little bit about how we read our applications. It's a process that maybe some of you, if you love to read stuff about college admissions, maybe you've read about. But we do team-based reading, so we have 2 people that will review an application together. They'll look at different parts, they'll talk about what they're reading, what they're learning, and try to come up with kind of a first round decision. And we have found that it's a really great way to make sure that the students that are going to be most attractive, most competitive in our process get to the committee room, where a group of 5, 6, 7 of us will sit around and talk about applications and sort of then make those finer decisions about who we think are going to be really great members of the class of this year, 2023. Lauren mentioned, kindness and sort of collaboration, and Greg talked a little bit about that as well. All of us up here we're all residential colleges or universities, which mean the vast majority of students are going to live on our campus. They're going to live in the residence halls, they're going to eat in the dining halls. So being part of a community is going to be a really important component of a student's application. And how are we going to figure that out? In lots of different ways. It's not going to be the same way for everyone. For some students, we might learn a little bit more about that through our supplement questions. We have 2 supplements, and I would say, kind of as a piece of advice for any college or university that has a supplement, they're going to be important. We ask questions in a very specific, and we have reasons why we ask the questions that we do. It might give you some clues into the kind of community that you might be a part of. If you read a college or university supplement and you're like, I'm not sure how I'm going to answer those questions, I'm not really sure I want to answer those questions, maybe that place isn't going to be a great fit for you. So I think that could be sort of clue number 1. But I think those supplements and the writing, what we're going to learn about you from the recommendations will all sort of help us with that kind of community component.
Good evening. So Lauren mentioned I spent a number of years at Carnegie Mellon. In all honesty, I thought I'd never leave. A wonderful opportunity opened up at Allegheny, and it's been a really great experience. And so one of the first questions I typically get is, what's the difference in all honesty, it's rule perspective. And so 2 things that jump out quickly, and it speaks to really how we review applications as well. One would be the ability to admit the diamonds, but also the diamonds in one. I like to tell people my personality is my personality, and while I love my time at Carnegie Mellon, I enjoy saying yes more. And so being at a place where you're not admitting 14%, and
Great, do you want to know?
I'm sitting right here.
Where you really do have the opportunity to say yes more. And I say that not Carnegie Mellon's a great place, but to say to you out in the audience that there are a range of colleges and universities. And I'm sure you all are amazing students in the room, amazing students here. But the parents of your students are amazing. And that there's a place for them. And so I think what ends up happening is the media pushes out this narrative of there are only 25, 50 colleges and universities, and their admit rates are all at this level. And the reality is that that's not true. There are a lot of amazing schools that are admitting many more students than that, and I certainly feel like I'm that one. And so when I say the ability to admit really great students, amazing students, but also being able to admit students who maybe had a rough junior year, a rough freshman year, didn't do as well on standardized tests, means a lot. And so when we talk about access, we talk about equity, we talk about diamonds in the rough, I think being able to review applications in a way where wow, this kid may not have had the strongest GPA or the strongest test scores, but there's something about this student that they're going to be a rock star in the future. I think that's the type of application review we get. So when we talk about a holistic review, we are reviewing literally everything to the point where when you look at our acceptance letters, every acceptance letter has, we'll say, a paragraph that is very specific to something in that student's application. And so when you're looking at 5,000 applications versus 20,000 applications, something you can do. When you're looking for 500 students versus 2,000, 3,000, what have you, you're able to personalize that process a little bit better. And so for us, we really are looking for students who will not only add to the academic environment, but just as important, the social environment. And so when we talk about community, that means a lot to us. And so we're really looking for students who are going to come and add value to the community that is allocated.
I'd like to thank you all for your comments because I'll just bounce off some of yours. So at a school like Michigan, I want to focus this in two aspects. So there are things, of course, in your control as a student, but then there are things that are going to be out of your control. We are a public institution, so I want to talk a little bit about that too, just to understand the competitiveness of the process and how some of it, even it is out of my hands. So we are a holistic review school, meaning every aspect of that application is going to be considered in the process. Of course, the academic review being kind of the foundation of that review, we are admitting you to attend school at the University of Michigan, so we want to make sure that you are going to be a successful student. So that would be your GPA, your curriculum choices, and your test score. So those pieces also come into play in context. So each of our representatives at the institution are going to have territories in which I am expected to be the expert of all Pennsylvania schools. So I've worked with the Shadyside team for many years, so I get to understand what does a competitive student at Shadyside look like. In no comparison of the rest of the applicant pool or other schools in the area, but really genuinely within Shadyside. So outside of the academic portfolio though, of course we have many more students that we can admit that meet those academic credentials. So we're looking outside of that, which many of them have mentioned, characteristic pieces. So firstly, looking at the recommendation letters, that other people within your community can say positive things about you, that you have an impact that leads them to believe that you would be successful at our institution as well. Thinking of your extracurricular development as well as your leadership. Leadership within your context doesn't always mean a committee title or president, but perhaps you have a part-time job in which you worked for several years. So maybe you are a leader within your family, meaning you take care of younger siblings, or it's not an official leader role, but expressing to us that you have committed, sustained involvement within your community. And then lastly, we do ask for 3 essays in the process. So it is quite extensive, both on your end of things as students to submit those to us, but also on our end to understand really your voice within the application, just putting context to your background and your story. So all of those pieces together help us to put an evaluation on the file. It is a multi-read system, so keep in mind that it's not just one human being or a computer at all really looking through these files, but multiple people getting eyes on all the aspects you provide. So those are kind of the pieces, of course, that you can control. You're choosing your curriculum. You are, preparing for tests and GPA, things like that. Outside of that, being a public institution, of course, there's institutional priorities. So we are a state school. We admit 50.5% in-state, 49.5% out-of-state. So while that does seem like a pretty even split, understand applications from one state versus applications from 49 plus international is going to look like a different pool, right? So keeping in mind that there are going to be many qualified students that unfortunately don't have a space at Michigan just based on application volume alone. We receive 65,000 applications year to year for a class of just less than 7,000. So understandably, there are many students that have hard conversations with me throughout the process, like, yeah, I understand your interest, however, volume really plays into that as well. Also understanding institutional priority for diversity of our class. So we want students who are coming from different backgrounds, not only to admit those that have privileged backgrounds, so those of low-income backgrounds, perhaps females in STEM, which is an underrepresented population on our campus, males in nursing, things like that help us to really build a class that can benefit the whole student body as well. So thinking of those, of the kind of out of your control aspects that unfortunately aren't as easy to take the weight of when you're a senior and you have that deny or defer letter, but really understanding the complexity of the process is going to be helpful as you enter it.
So a follow-up to that definitely came through was one of the biggest sources of anxiety for students and their parents is the feeling like they should know what they want to study in college, or how they're being reviewed based on what they say they might want to study, and this works very differently at your different schools. So could each of you just comment a little bit on maybe, like at Carnegie Mellon, what's the musical theater kid process versus the computer science? Like what is that, how is that all Carnegie Mellon? Or at Tufts, you've got two options. At Allegheny, you're a liberal arts college, and at Michigan, you're applying to your school. It's all really different. Can you quickly comment on how your intended major, whether you have one or not, plays a role in that review process?
Yeah, I mean, just quickly, if you're going to apply to Carnegie Mellon, you kind of have to have an idea of what you want to do. You cannot apply undecided to the university, and I mean, frankly, it's becoming difficult to transfer from one program to the next. So, I think we see a number of students that come to us that study engineering. They never want to be an engineer in a day in their life, but they understand that a degree in engineering is a universal degree that's applicable to a number of disciplines. But if you're not admitted to engineering and you want to be an engineer, there's no such thing as almost being an engineer. Either you are or you aren't. So you should probably go somewhere that can guarantee you engineering in that case. So, I think that we're probably a little bit more specialized here, and that you kind of really do have to at least have an idea of what you want to do if you're going to apply to Carnegie Mellon. You can double major, minor, take classes across disciplines, but transferring from one program to the next is increasingly challenging.
So at Tufts, students apply either to the School of Arts and Sciences, which has everything from art history and English and psychology to biochem physics. We also have a School of Engineering. And then we also have a Bachelor of Fine Arts program, which is a program in the visual arts, which requires a portfolio submission. When we're looking at students who apply to the School of Engineering, our curriculum is especially important. Our faculty have come to realize that it is exceedingly important for students to have both physics and calculus by the time they graduate from high school. The level of calculus is not so important, but that they do need to have both of those. For students who are in our School of Arts and Sciences, we admit, I'd say probably half of the students have said undecided. So we don't have to have that major necessarily, but if a student, for example, may talk about pre-med or pre-dent and their science coursework may not be at the highest level or may not be their best grades, that might be an indicator to us that maybe this is not going to be a great fit.
At Allegheny College, true to life liberal arts experience, so your first 2 years breadth, depth, exploration, and then you choose your major. The one caveat is that you must choose a minor outside of that division. And so your major minor are basically mixed. And so if your major is in one division, your minor must be in something totally different. We think it helps our students to be a little bit more marketable, but more so helps them really figure out what they're most interested in. And so there's no applying to one major versus another major. You apply to the college. We actually stopped using undecided as a term because we felt like there's this negative connotation from it. And so every time a parent or someone asks a student, it's like, oh gosh, it's the scariness of not knowing, and undecided just doesn't sound as nice as still deciding. Still deciding. It sounds like there's some direction that you're actually putting thought on it. Versus undecided, I just have no clue what I'm ever going to do. Still deciding is I'm thinking about it. So we moved away from using that to still deciding. Students love it. Parents seem to appreciate it as well. And so your first 2 years, you're still deciding. So we like that.
That was all you, wasn't it?
University of Michigan is a little bit of a blend of each of these. We do have individual academic units. You do select one of the 7 on the application itself. So as I'm reading the different units, there are categories that I would look for more in depth. So for instance, similar to Tufts, the College of Engineering, looking specifically at your math and science preparation. If I'm looking at our nursing students, I'm looking for demonstrated interest in the field. So having some exploration in that hospital setting or any version of the medical field. That does look very different than, of course, from our arts and performing units. So having a portfolio to demonstrate your talent in these fields, in which I myself don't make any decisions on those. We actually send them up to those individual units to have their decisions made. So It does depend. I would say students that don't have an idea, there's still a place for you. You don't get to apply directly to the university as a whole, but our College of Literature, Science, and the Arts, which would be most similar to a liberal arts education, is going to be kind of for those that might not have quite the instinct at the time of application. So there are ways to float within the university, cross-campus transferring to any of the units that you might have interest in once you're there. But there is no major at the time of admission, so kind of a little bit of each of these.
Thanks. So another very common question is kind of around the theme of like, how do you know how hard Shadyside is? So this one parent wrote in that their son had transferred to Shadyside at the start of 9th grade, coming from a strong public school, straight A student in public school, gets to Shadyside, experiences a new level of rigor, used to be all A's, this parent writes now fighting for B's, and kind of like, how do you weigh the context or the rigor of the high school when you're reviewing those applications?
So I'm not being paid to say this, I promise. I cannot stress this enough. Context is tremendously important. Nobody understands the context more than the counselors. At a school like Shadyside, there is no need to get an agent, to get an independent counselor, because they don't understand the context. The landscape of highly selective college admission has changed to try and eliminate any gaming of the system whatsoever. Academics speak for themselves. Your SAT is going to speak for itself. Your grades are going to speak for itself. But when the entire pool has that, understanding the context and the relationships that your counselors have built with you over 4 years at college, you can't buy that, right? So it is tremendously important to trust the counselors and believe in the fact that they are going to make sure that the colleges know the environment that the student's in, how well the student's performing in that environment, and understanding, again, just context as a whole. So for us, it's the counselors, it's the profile, it's the recommendations. And so again, I'll get off my soapbox now, but
No, stay.
Yeah, I mean,
no, I love this soapbox. This is a good one.
Seriously, so you're going to submit 12 applications for your college application. Our Dean of Admission has been at Carnegie Mellon for 40 years. He's admitted a quarter of all of Carnegie Mellon's living alumni. We can tell when an application is not genuine. So as much as you think you might be able to game the system and work and try and get advantage in the system, the best thing you can do to gain that advantage is to trust the counselors to tell your story and trust them to point you in the right direction. As Cornell said, you do not have to go to a top 25 university to get your dream job. So if you think that you need to kind of look for advantages to get into a school like that, chances are the fit's not there. You should probably be looking somewhere else. Trust the counselors in that regard. So I'll stop now.
And I would just say, as we look at really 3.5 years worth of grades for students that are applying, I think all of us understand that 9th grade, no matter where you are, that 9th grade is a transition. It's different. The expectations are different. The classes are harder, and we do understand that for lots of kids there is a transition in 9th grade. So we're I think a little forgiving of some grades that may look a little different in 9th grade versus the rest of your high school experience. So, and I think maybe the other thing too is we're all human beings. We see 4 real live human beings up here. And some of us are parents that have gone or are going through this process. So it's, it does sort of bring it all to reality. So
I would just say, you're at a great school, great resources. We certainly understand the rigor of the school, and as we review transcripts, we know what we're looking at. I mean, there are connections, there are relationships that are had, and so we have a good understanding of what's going on here versus maybe what's going on at other schools, and acknowledge that when we're reviewing those applications. Truth be told, rigor of school is one of many of the factors that we take into consideration when we are reviewing applications. And so rigor of school will be the percentage of students who are ultimately going on to 4-year colleges. We're looking to see what advanced classes are offered, if schools offer, averages for average, grades in classes or overall school, we see that as well.
So along those, do you have something you want to add?
Not super original. So you can go ahead.
Yes.
Along those lines, and this is maybe a harder one, but I've had more parents asking me and multiple parents writing in saying, it's awesome that so many schools have such a focus on diversity. Is there still room for a kid who does go to a prep school, who has had every advantage? What does that look like at this point?
I can start since I didn't answer the last one. We are also a public institution that's governed by Proposition 2 in the state of Michigan, meaning we can't actually look at race, ethnicity, sex in the process at all. So as it relates to diversity, we have to be quite creative in the way that we are going to fill a diverse class, because we still see the benefit in that. We see the benefit for everyone, not just that student who holds an aspect of diversity. So I would answer the question in the sense that yes, of course there's still space for everyone, in that a majority of our class are going to meet that privileged background. That's the reality at Michigan right now. And so there's no disadvantage for coming from a background such as Shady's had. Does that answer your question?
Yeah.
If I could just add, and so I think one, we all need to expand the definition of diversity. And so I think when we think of diversity, we think automatically we go straight to ethnicity. And we ought to stop that, because diversity comes in so many different other ways. And so one of the ways I think for us at Allegheny that we talked about it has been socioeconomic diversity. And so if you're not familiar, there's an organization out there called American Talent Initiative, and their goal is to have more lower socioeconomic students going to top colleges and universities. And so I think there's 100 plus colleges and universities that have signed up to say, yes, we want to be part of this, and it's looking to increase that percentage. That is not based on race or ethnicity. It's really just about making sure that pool is represented. When we think about just diversity in general, though, whether it's women in STEM was mentioned earlier, it could be gender. As you would imagine, at a large percent of liberal arts colleges, more women than men, and so we'd like to see more men at a number of these places. So if you're at 60%, 70% women, you're thinking, okay, wow, we'd love to see that balance, and so that would be something that schools would take into consideration. We want students from both private schools and public schools, and so for us, that would be one of the factors that we're taking into consideration as well. And so certainly not a disadvantage for students coming from an amazing place like this. It's, wow, how do we make sure we're getting more students from here? Based on our location, we're seeing more students coming from, say, Publix or rural, based on where we're at. So us, we want more students from private, to help balance that out.
Great. Another question is about fit, and parents and families kind of wanting to know what is your advice on finding fit? Fit is kind of that overused word that I think sometimes kids hear as like, oh, that's the nice thing they say when they think I'm not going to get in. Oh, it's all about the fit. It's like, oh, she's so, it's a, I have had many students tell me they feel like it's sort of the, you're such a good kid, but you're not going to get in, and that's what fit feels like. But how would you talk, for parents and students who are early in their search, we have a lot of 9th and 10th grade families here, even 11th graders who are really just starting the process. What are your best pieces of advice around finding fit?
I would start, especially for 9th and 10th graders, as you just start to think about college. And, do you want a small liberal arts place, a place like Allegheny? Do you want a more urban kind of place? Are you not really sure what you want? Start poking around websites, read. We all have blogs that are written by current students. And I think you can also tell just from the vibe of the website, does this seem like a place that I connect with in some way? But those student blogs can be just sort of a first step to say, yeah, this, I really like what these kids are writing about, and I maybe could see myself, at a place like that. So that might be just one first step to take.
For the love of God, stay off of College Confidential. Don't go to College Confidential. You know,
Are
so-
some of you wondering what College Confidential is, or do you all know what
No,
it
if
is?
you don't know what it is, just stay away from it.
Right. But they all just pulled out their phones
Oh,
like,
man,
College
everyone's doing it.
Confidential, I think I have to
Everyone's
look.
doing College Confidential.
It's like overzealous parents,
Yeah,
basically.
pretending to be students.
So often pretending to be students, writing reviews or advice about the college process. The one thing we do use it for is when colleges are notifying, often are like when students are like, when am I going to get the letter? That's the only thing that we have found College Confidential to be valuable for.
I will say, I mean, there is some truth to fit, right? So let's use our School of Computer Science, for example. We see a lot of students that apply and they say, well, you know, I want to go and work for Google. And it's like, but I really don't like math. It's like, oh, that's great. But, you know, if you're going to come to us and use us as the entree into Google, I mean, we start off in discrete math. So, I mean, you really got to like math. So you can go somewhere else and study computer science and go and work for Google, but if you're going to come to us as that gateway, if you're not like doing math problems on the weekend for fun, yeah, it's probably not the best. It's probably not the best fit. So there is some truth to the fit, but I would echo what Susan said. Talk to the current students. I mean, they're the ones that are living it right now. Admission counselors, you know, depending on who you get, it might be a used car salesman that's trying to get you into a new car there. So, you know, but current students, they're living it, they're breathing it, and they're still there, which is what's interesting too. They didn't transfer out, they didn't get denied. They're there, they're living it, and I would say most colleges anymore, if you call the admission office and try and get connected with the current student, they'll hook you up with somebody.
I've got two pieces of advice. So first, and I say this all the time, I think for students in particular, just be true to yourself. Be true to who you are. And when I say that, it goes a long way. And so, for example, if you find yourself joining clubs in particular that you have zero interest in, only because you think certain schools might look at that and think, wow, this is exactly what I want. And so, for example, you know, when I've spoken to students over the years, out here, yeah, I've joined a cappella and I've joined crew. I'm like, oh, do you like it? No, not at all. I'm only doing it because I heard it looks good for certain schools. You know, that's not beneficial. And so at the end of this process, what you don't want to do is you don't want to look back and think, wow, I just put together this resume and that's not me. And why I say that is because what could end up happening is ultimately you have been admitted to a school based on something that is not true to who you are. And so what type of experience will you have at that place if you've done all of the stuff that maybe you don't enjoy personally to get into a place that you thought would be the right fit? And so just keep that in mind as you go through this process. Do things because you are truly interested in them and because you like them, not because you think it's going to help you get into a certain school. The second one would be really just self-reflection. And so if you know during your time here, you learn best in a certain environment, i.e., wow, you know, the resources that I've had here have been so amazing. You know, small class size. Wow, I've done so well because of the teachers and the counseling that I've had. This one-on-one attention, that's why I've done so well. You know, then you probably ought to go to a place or look at schools that fall into that category. And so I think being able to look within and self-reflect on, okay, what are truly the things that are most important to you, I think goes a long way.
The only thing I would add is, I guess, firstly, that I would commend you for even being here because I think your attendance here is going to feed into the idea of what fit is at a college university. I'd also commend your counseling office for being a resource for you in this process. I personally am a first-generation student. My parents did not attend college, so for me to do what I'm doing now seems quite opposite of what they might have thought I would do. So I did not sit through panels like this. I didn't have an idea of what fit meant. So I chose the school because I liked the city in which it was located. So as silly as it sounds, I fell in love with the area of the state, and that's where I attended college. So it is more than just the university feel. Thinking about the type of city you're committing at least 4 years to, how far away from home do you want to be, and what learning environment do you do best? So do you like the smaller private school feel, or are you looking for something, you know, large, public, Big Ten feel like Michigan? So thinking of outside of just the campus culture, which is hard to get unless you are a student, which I also would advocate for connecting with current students because they are the lived experience. But it is hard to really get that campus feel from just conversations with admissions professionals. So making connections along the way. Of course, your counseling staff knows people that have gone on to these institutions from your school. So that scene of what does it feel to leave Shady Side to go on to this X university, that's a huge resource, right? They have the experience of coming from your background to the next step. So thinking of those resources in terms of fit, using what you have available and just being thankful that you have them.
Can I share a quick story? I thought about this. Greg may have heard this one. So one of the years I was at Carnegie Mellon, as we think about fit, there's a student I was talking to, and they said, "You're my top choice." I'm like, "Wow, this is great. What do you want to major in?" And they said something. I thought, "Oh, we don't offer that as a major." And they said, "Don't worry about it. We can make it work." And I thought, "No, actually, we can't make it work." And so ultimately, we were his top choice, not because of fit, but only because ranking. And so that was that moment of, wow, wait, no, we really can't make that work. I don't know what type of experience it's going to be for you if you want to major in something that we don't offer. And so make sure, obviously you're not looking at places based on that.
And one thing I will add is we start working one-on-one with students in junior year, but our friends and colleagues who are here tonight spoke to our faculty this afternoon. So if you're thinking like, oh wow, this awesome resource that starts kind of later in high school, we don't want you to tailor your high school experience to college. But all of your advisors and all of your teachers, I mean, they heard today from Cornell and Susan on so many of these same topics. So they're not there to give you college advice, but they're pretty knowledgeable about how our students transition to college, and they're all a resource for you. It isn't just us in the college office. Cornell and Susan have both are going through and have been through this process as parents. Can you both comment on how you view the process differently now, going through it and having been through it as a parent?
Not fair, right?
Yeah, two words, it stinks. It was painful, in honesty, for me. The amount of emails, the amount of letters, I mean, it was tough. And I said earlier today, there was a moment, in particular when my son was going through the process, where I had to keep saying, okay, what advice would I give parents? What advice would I give other students? And so I would try to go back to that. One of the pieces of advice I would tell parents is, you ought not talk about college admissions every night. Every time you see your son or daughter, you ought not talk about it. And then the minute I see my son, I'm like, dude, what are you gonna do? What are you gonna major in? And it's tough not to. And so, all those years of giving advice, and then I get to it, and my wife's like, really? Every day? Every time you see him, it's, what schools are you looking at now? What are you thinking about majoring? And so, there was that moment of, okay, wow, I have to take a step back and acknowledge that it's not an easy process. And for the parents in the room, it can be challenging. And so what I learned from the process, though, and wasn't always the best at it, was you really have to let your children be the drivers. And so that's what I was able to do. Now I asked lots of questions, but it was really about, okay, you've got to manage this process. I'm here to help. If we're not talking about it, I'm going to ask questions. Maybe it was a little bit much. I realize that now. But really letting them drive it. And own it, but being there in a support.
So I'm gonna just stand for me, because my legs are not. So I'm gonna disagree a little bit with Cornell and say that it's been really interesting to be a parent. I have two older stepchildren. They're both out of college, and when my stepson is the older of the two, when he was going through this process. And we had shared custody, so they were with us half the week. And every Wednesday night when the kids would get there and we'd sit down for dinner, and my husband would launch into, so Jay, have you figured out where you're gonna go to college yet? And I would just watch him just slide down into his chair. And I finally had to have a conversation with him and saying, like, we cannot talk about this every single night. Like, he's shutting down, this is not working. So fast forward now, our daughter is a senior in high school, and I should also explain my husband's an engineer, and I do not mean to offend any engineers in the audience, but engineers like to find solutions, and they like to find solutions more quickly than maybe other human beings are able to come to those solutions. So I figured this engineer thing out a little bit too late. I did figure it out for Jay. I definitely figured it out for our daughter. And I have to keep telling him that it's a process, that it takes time, that she has until May 1st to make her decision. We have to go and visit, and I've had to like literally talk him off the ledge a couple of different times because he just wants to constantly have the conversation about college. And I think, I know he gets it, but he can't help himself. So we're, at a point where she is, has gotten some really good news, and we're waiting for some more. But it's been a really, really fascinating process. And I would also say, maybe reflect on this, how like your kid changes throughout their senior year of high school. And she is definitely wants to go away to college, like she can't wait, she's really excited. But yet there are times when she is so like next to us that I'm like, I need some space. I know you're like knowing you're not gonna be with us in 6 months, but I need a little bit of space. So I would just, sort of caution you if you've not had a son or daughter go through this process. It's just been a really interesting time since September, so.
Thanks.
Yeah.
Okay, maybe the last,
Yeah.
go ahead.
Yeah.
They're all different too. Just recognizing every child is different. My daughter, I was like, no, I don't want this to be done. My son, like, no, gosh, please let this be over. And it just really does vary depending on the child.
Okay, maybe the last question I'll kind of give to you is just like general advice. Like, what's your best piece of advice for students as they kind of go through high school and start to think about college?
I would just say, for the students, have fun. I mean, like yes, you should work. You should work really hard. But while high school was many, many, many years ago for me, and someone said this to me, don't rush it. You have, in all honesty, after you finish high school, you finish college, you have the rest of your life to work 40, 50, 60 hours a week. Why rush to get there? And so while you're in high school, while you're in college, take time to really enjoy the moment that is, because once it's gone, it's gone.
Sorry to talk about my daughter again, but she has started to go to a lot of athletic events at her school, basketball, hockey games. She even went to a swim meet, which that I gave her credit for that. But I think she kind of regrets that she didn't do more of that earlier on in high school. So I think, sort of to just connect with what Cornell said, to really enjoy your high school experience, enjoy your friends, because it does go really quickly. And I would say for parents, I think to appreciate who your son or daughter is, and my daughter's high school or college experience where she's applying are not, that some of the places I kind of expected or applied to, and others I didn't. But those were places that she chose for really good reasons, and I think just being really supportive of how your son or daughter might land in this process, and I think supporting them along the way, I think it makes a huge difference for them.
I'm trying to think how to word this without doing more harm than good here. No one will ever kick you out of a room for knowing too much about calculus and physics, right? But not knowing calculus and physics is going to deselect you from applying to certain schools. So, I think oftentimes there's like this arms race in high stakes college admission, where students are trying to take linear algebra and discrete math and multivariable calculus and AP Physics 9 and like trying to like really kind of challenge themselves to take these higher level courses. They will not transfer in, all right? If you're going to be an engineer, we are teaching you linear algebra. We're not going to allow somebody else to teach that to you and transfer in. So at the bare minimum, knowing physics and knowing calculus and being exposure to those classes, that is going to put you at a level where you're not going to be deselected from even the most competitive and rigorous STEM schools that are out there. Feeling this urge to to go to a community college or a local college and take classes beyond that, you really got to try and weigh the real cost and the opportunity cost of doing that. So as I've said more and more, we're looking for community engagement and collaboration. And while I think you're going to be putting, if you do that and take those kind of classes, you're going to put a lot of eggs in your academic basket. You're going to do so at the expense of being able to do things outside of the classroom. And I think increasingly colleges are realizing, I mean, you can come to us with 30 college credits. They're not going to, you're a freshman. They are not going to transfer in. So what's the benefit of doing that? But as you go into your senior year, as much as you might feel this urge to take TV, pottery, lunch, and study hall, which was seriously my senior year schedule, but it was honors TV because I took regular TV junior year. As much as you might feel the urgency to, the desire to do that, it could ultimately deselect you from certain programs in the long run. So, I think if you're taking classes that you're maxing out your high school curriculum classes, you're on a good path. If you're feeling the urgency to go and do stuff beyond that, you got to ask yourself at what expense are you going to do it? Because while it might make you more academically admissible, you're going to lose a lot of the community engagement and the collaboration because of the time it takes to do that. I don't know, did I do more harm than good?
No, you're good.
I would just encourage you to continue asking questions and using your resources. So we are paid to answer your questions. You can call us at any time or email us, and we certainly have grace for those that are going through the process for the first time. So your questions are not silly. We would encourage you to ask the institution directly. I would agree that College Confidential is not the most reliable source for information, nor are blogs or your friend's dad went 30 years ago, things like that. So please continue to ask the professionals as well as the staff you have here at Shady Site. So you have 3 full-time paid professionals to do some of this help for you. So I would just encourage using them and not just relying on previous knowledge.
Okay, so we are almost at the 1 hour mark, which is how we build this. I'm so thrilled to see so many students here, and of course I'm thrilled to see parents here too. But as we open up for just a couple questions from the audience, I am particularly interested in hearing first from a student, if any of the students who are here have a question or two for our panelists. Yes, Charlotte.
So I'm a sophomore and I'm interested in studying musical theater in college. So I'm just curious if any parts of the process that you've spoken about earlier tonight don't necessarily apply as much to musical theater, if they apply more, anything like that is what I'm curious about.
So
Yeah, the question is for somebody who is interested in studying musical theater. We heard a little bit about this before, but does everything still apply? Are there parts that maybe don't apply if you're highly specialized in something? That would be sort of the broadening of it. If you are very focused, do all the other things matter as much?
I mean, yes. Okay. So yeah, you can't fake. So many people might not know this about Carnegie Mellon, but musical theater is by far our most competitive major. I mean, the acceptance rate is less than 0.5%. So, sorry, but you can't fake your way through that audition, right? So much like a computer science app can't fake their way through loving chemistry or loving calculus or loving computer science, you can't fake your way through loving the craft and putting your heart and soul into it. And I think that increasingly too, look at musical theater. You're not standing on a stage reciting, lines from Hamlet anymore. It's a lot of CGI, it's a lot of collaboration, it's a lot of going across disciplines. There's a business side to it as well. So, I mean, we want students that are passionate about what it is they want to study, regardless of what it is, whether it's computer science or musical theater, but also students that are very curious about other disciplines as well and have an appreciation for those disciplines. So while it is very different in the sense that, 99% of your admission process is going to be based on the audition, at least for us, but it's very similar in the sense that, when you come to Carnegie Mellon, you're going to work a heck of a lot with computer scientists as a musical theater major, because I mean that's the future of technology. You know, even like you might not think of it, but even robotics. Robots have to move. Nobody understands movement better than drama students. So, you know, we want you to kind of, you know, think outside of the box. Take a Python class when you're there, and, you know, take your passion and apply it towards other people's passions, and, you know, see what happens. So it's the same church, it's the different pew. You know, the admission process is very different. It's the audition. But what we're looking for in students is that genuine interest in being a lifelong learner in their particular passion. So that's similar regardless of what age you is.
And I would maybe just, you know, go take a few steps back, that I would, you know, really recommend if for students that may think they know what they want to study, and I'm not picking on you, what they want to study, and focus kind of solely on that one kind of area, because you might get to your senior year and say, I don't really want to do that anymore, and you've kind of cut out some other opportunities. So I think high school, you want to make sure you're going to have sort of you're going to be able to cast the widest net when you're applying to college, so that you're not, you know, sort of eliminating any possible choices.
And sorry to tie to this and go back to your question about advice. The worst thing you can do in the college admission process is be the student that only does well in the classes they care about. So, you know, we see it a lot with musical theater. They're getting A's in their classes that relate to that space, but C's and D's in math and science. And they say, well, I'm never going to use that. Well, when we're getting, you know, thousands of applicants for 10 spots, there are students that are just as talented, that are just as passionate, that are just as engaged in all areas of their academics, just not in their arts classes. The same is true in computer science. You know, you can be an AIME recipient and get a 14 on the test, but if you're getting C's in history, there's a whole lot of people that have that same test score that got the A in history as well. So you have to be equally dedicated to your studies.
AIME is an international math exam. In case anyone didn't know that.
It's hard.
Your comment made me just think about athletics, for the comment about you might be very, very into it and then decide you're not as into it. We didn't really talk anything about athletics in the college process. It looks different at Michigan than it does at Allegheny, than it does at Tufts, than it does at Carnegie Mellon.
I think this question's yours.
Does anybody want to say anything about the role that athletics play in your office?
At Michigan, it is a completely separate process. Athletic recruitment is separate than the admissions process, though every athlete still needs to apply and go through our system. Understandably, athletes do have different accommodations at the university, so those that may not have the academic credentials that would meet a standard of a Michigan student is balanced with the support they get on campus. So certainly there are those that are going to get in through their academic ability and what they can offer campus outside of their academics. However, if we have huge concerns of a student, regardless of how well they can perform athletically, it is not going to be a good fit at Michigan. Understandably, they have to get a degree from our university. So we want to make sure that we're admitting students that can be successful. And that goes for other facets of abilities. So of course, athletes, but also things like theater. That would have been my comment. We want to make sure that you can do well academically at the university. And there are other special circumstances that we look at students for what they can offer our campus outside of just the admissions credentials that we're typically looking, but athletics does have its own grouping process.
The only thing I would add would be more for the students. I had this conversation with my son who was a recruit, and basically what I said was you ought to pick a place that if you are not, for one reason or another, playing that sport after year 1 or 2, you'll still be happy with. Meaning, don't just go to a place based solely on athletics, whether it's an injury or just you realize you don't want to play that sport after a couple years, you're still happy at that place. And so looking at it beyond just, okay, I really like the coach, we've had great conversations, it's going to be an amazing time, and forgetting about the other aspect of that college experience.
Is there one last question? From a parent or a student? One last? Yes.
My daughter is a sophomore here. since Shady side is not a pure AP school or IB school, so what's your recommendation that should they prepare the SAT subject test early, or at that time they apply to the university, is SAT subject test still going to be considered important due to the support from college board, and what's your school's opinion, advice to the students?
So I actually made this comment to faculty this afternoon that, I applaud schools when they step away from the AP curriculum and faculty develop courses that are better fit for their school. We, as admissions officers, and I think I can say this for all of us, we do not favor a school that offers AP or the International Baccalaureate. We are assessing what has been available to a student at their high school, and at more selective, highly selective places, the expectation is going to be that a rigorous curriculum. Any college admissions officer is going to look at the transcript in concert with the high school profile, which is a document that will tell us about the curriculum and what's been offered, so that we are able to make our assessment appropriately. In terms of subject tests, there are very few places left that require subject tests, so that's something that you can talk with the College Counseling Office about. But having subject tests or AP scores is not, for most places, not going to be kind of a necessary part of the process.
The College Board has actually stopped writing new questions for the SAT subject test. So once they go through the cycle of questions, at some point it's going to sunset and the SAT subject tests are just going to go away.
For Allegheny College, we actually made test optional a few years back. In response to what I would argue is just way too much pressure and stress put on this one test versus what these young men and women are doing over 4 years. And so it's really our way of telling students they're more than your test score. And so we basically said if you don't believe your test scores are a true reflection of your ability, then don't submit them. Period. There's no gamesmanship to it. If you don't submit them, it just means you put more weight on the other aspects of the application. And then I think for students and parents, there's that realization of, okay, wow, yes, I'm still going to take the test, but recognizing that, yes, there are strong schools out there that if I don't do well on this one test, and doing well is really dependent on the type of place a student goes as well, that they still feel like there's a place out there that I'll get into because I may not have to submit scores to that institution.
Okay, just show of hands. Take the SAT and ACT with the writing or without. How many of you say, take it with the writing? Okay. That answers that question. There are a couple more that we didn't get to, and I'm so sorry if you're like, oh man. Why they say don't use with the writing? Why not with the writing? You don't use it for anything?
We don't look at it.
We don't use it for anything.
So it's truly not relevant.
With the revamped SATs, a lot of the questions that used to be part of the writing SAT2 subject test are now folded into the evidence-based reading and writing section of the SAT. So now the writing section is really just essay evaluation, and all of us, I think, require an essay, and we're going to care more about the essay that you submitted to us as opposed to the one that you submitted through the College Board. But a lot of kind of the nuts and bolts multiple choice questions that were part of the SAT subject test are now part of evidence-based reading and writing. The new SAT, it's not a reasoning test anymore. It's actually tied to the Common Core. So before you could take classes to kind of learn how to be a better test taker on the SAT and improve your score. Now the only way to get a higher grade on the SAT is to learn more of the material. So a lot of those questions that we used to care about that were optional, we made everybody pay extra for, are now just included as part of the evidence-based reading and writing school.
There are schools that still do look to see, have you taken the SAT with writing? So these are 4 very different schools, but there are many, many more schools that are not represented in the 4, and so it's important. I mean, we generally advise that you take it with the essay in case you end up applying to a place that needs it, but I think kind of like the subject tests, the essay is probably diminishing in its value for colleges. So in the interest of time, I want to just thank our panelists so much for being here and for sharing. Thank you.